Welcome to the week that was, TIOL's weekly news roundup. Today we bring you an insight into FDI reforms for e-commerce companies and other news, including the presentation of a welfare budget for Delhi and the PM's agenda in Europe.
There are also stories on the stiffer penalties for environmental violations, new guidelines for selection of law officers, and some international news on new taxes. But first, let's look into the major reform of FDI norms for e-commerce retail.
To attract foreign investment into India, the government has opened up the e-commerce retail sector to 100% foreign direct investment. The government has issued guidelines which for the first time define e-commerce as well as differentiate between two types of e-commerce companies. Those making direct sales to the customer through an inventory-based model as against a marketplace model of providing the IT platform to facilitate sales between the buyers and the sellers. However, this understanding of e-commerce may be subject to conflicting interpretations and needs some fine-tuning, especially because 100% FDI is now permitted only for e-commerce companies facilitating sales through the marketplace model of e-commerce. This means e-commerce companies like Amazon would not be able to operate a hybrid model and sell directly to its customers for the time being. Other conditions imposed for allowing 100% FDI include inculcating price transparency by restricting discounts to ensure price parity in the marketplace. Several questions arise on who will monitor prices and what is to stop foreign e-commerce companies from offering indirect discounts through special promotion schemes. Yet, in spite of the obvious flaws, it is a major reform for e-commerce retail as it defines e-commerce to provide direction to India's FDI policy and could form the basis for clarity in tax laws for e-commerce companies, which have several pending tax disputes with state governments. Gujarat joins other states of India to impose entry tax on e-commerce portals.
Giving into the demands of traders and retailers, the Gujarat government has sought to introduce a level playing field for traders by introducing an entry tax for e-commerce portals. The Gujarat Assembly passed the Gujarat Tax on Entry of Specified Goods into Local Areas Bill 2016, which changes the present Act of 2001 that did not cover e-commerce transactions. Local traders adversely impacted by the cheaper price of goods coming into the state through online purchase protested. Under the new bill, the e-commerce portal importing the product into the state is now liable to collect the tax from the customers and pay it to the government.
Delhi's AAP government has proposed a welfare budget for the state.
The Aam Aadmi Party has stood up for Delhi's common man by cutting down the rate of value-added tax on a range of daily use goods and services and outlined health, education and transport as the key areas for development. While the two sectors, education and health, will together account for 34% of the Delhi government's total spending, common use items such as footwear, school bags, watches, budget hotel rooms, sweets and savouries will now cost less to keep at par with the lower tax rate in neighbouring states. In its second tax-free and welfare budget, the Aam Aadmi Party government has rationalized the value-added tax structure and promised to make Delhi the country's only state with the lowest value-added tax. Nearly 6 million individuals will receive notices from the Income Tax Department.
The Income Tax Department, intent on increasing direct tax revenue and widening the tax base, has strategically targeted tax defaulters and non-filers of income tax returns. The department has already identified 5.8 million non-filers with high-value transactions for the assessment year 2014-15. All these non-filers were tracked through the non-filer monitoring system created last year by the department, which helps to analyze multi-source data from annual information return, TDS statements and banks to identify non-filers with annual cash deposits of Rs 10 lakh or more, mutual fund investments and credit card spends of Rs 2 lakh or more annually. A massive number of tax notices have already been sent to tax offenders. However, one taxpayer who has received such a notice told TIOL Tube that he received the notice for his dissolved partnership firm, and it seems the revenue has been sending notices indiscriminately to all non-filers rather than based on filtered data.
Penalty for flouting environmental norms could soon be higher.
Following the face-off between the National Green Tribunal and the Art of Living Foundation, the government has proposed an amendment to the Environment Protection Act that seeks to impose a stringent penalty for any violation of environmental rules. The amendment introduces the option of imprisonment for violations that proposes a 7-year jail term, which can be extended to a life term. Even the maximum penalty has been hiked up to Rs 15 crore, with violators having to deposit 75% of their penalty amount before any further hearing. The amendment bill segregates damages in 3 categories: minor violations, non-substantial violations and substantial violations. A hefty fine of Rs 5 crore to Rs 15 crore is proposed to be imposed on violations causing substantial damage to the environment. The highest court in the land is finding ways to cut down on paper and go green.
The Supreme Court is seriously considering cutting down the use of paper to save trees. Under existing rules of the Apex Court, no constitutional amendment will be challenged without filing 1 + 3 volumes of a petition for court records, each of which may run into hundreds of pages. Judges do not read more than 40 pages, as the rest is usually repetition. Every day, 500 to 1000 pages are printed for each judge on an Apex Court bench. Considering these facts, a 5-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court will deliberate on easing its business rules to cut down on the voluminous sets of papers that a lawyer is required to file with the case. The Apex Court's desire to go green was a byproduct of hearing arguments on the legality of reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the Parliament and state assemblies. The Apex Court has reformed the process for appointment of State Council.
The Supreme Court has intervened to introduce a transparent and merit-based system of appointment of law officers in the states of Punjab and Haryana. These new guidelines halt the random and unregulated system of appointment at present. Several cases of such appointments out of political benevolence had been challenged before the Apex Court. Hearing these cases, the Supreme Court rejected the state's argument that these appointments are contractual and not public employment. The Apex Court held that state law officers discharged a public function, and there is no option for the states but to choose the best at the bar out of those who were willing. The struggle for parity among civil services continues.
Civil services officers have sought political intervention in their battle for parity with All India Services. A delegation of non-IAS civil service officers met Dr. Jitendra Singh, Minister of State for Prime Minister Office, Personal and Public Grievances, for implementation of the recommendations of the 7th Central Pay Commission that addresses their long-standing grievance of discrimination against IAS and other services in promotion, pay and perks. Today, the IAS and IFS officers enjoy an edge in pay in terms of additional increments, while all senior level posts covering the majority of departments, both technical and administrative, are headed by IAS officers. The delegation sought the adoption of the new system of cadre reconstructing to ensure timely promotion for all services. The minister promised to forward the case to the Union Finance Ministry. The government is in a fix whether or not to allow Apple to import its second-hand iPhones into India.
India is such a huge market for Apple iPhones that the US-based company has sought permission from the Indian government to import its pre-owned iPhones for sale as refurbished handsets into India. This request has put the government into a quandary and is also facing opposition from industry. Allowing Apple to import may compel the government to open the floodgates for other players too. From phones, the list would expand to second-hand laptops and desktop computers even. This could open up a window for import of scrap under the garb of refurbished and twisting India's anti-dumping laws. Another major concern is that such imports could hurt the government's Make in India program, under which a lot of mobile manufacturers are entering into the country. Indian shrimp exporters may be hit by the hike in anti-dumping duty by America.
The US government has hiked the anti-dumping duty imposed on import of frozen shrimps from India. In a review of dumping duties, the preliminary average duty has been raised from 2.96% to 4.89%. The final duties may be different from the preliminary duties, which shall be finalized by July this year. US is the largest market for Indian shrimps, and this business expects a drop in exports unless alternate markets are developed. Aquaculture farmers in India may be forced to bear the impact. Exporters have urged the Ministry of Commerce to sort out the issue.
On this note, we conclude this bulletin of the week that was. Thank you for watching.
You may write us on editor@tiol.in. Have a sporty weekend ahead.